Let's talk about Game of Thrones Season 6, Episode 4, Book of the Stranger. It's interesting because when they talk about the old gods and the new gods, it's the seven. And one of them is the stranger, which represents death, and it's one that's not often prayed to. So this week, when we talk about the Book of the Stranger, in the plot, it's what the large woman with the shame has been reading to Marjorie Tyrell. And she's actually learned a little bit about it, and she has a great conversation later with the head sparrow about it. But first, let's talk about the episode in a little more detail. Hey everybody, I was trying to find a place to sit where the sun wasn't directly in my eyes, but also I had some light on my face because it's so beautiful. So I'm just trying to make this a short one this week. I was watching some of Season 4 with my father over the weekend, and he referred to the long-suffering Sansa, which is absolutely true. When you look at what that poor girl went through, having to see her father be executed, having to be engaged to Joffrey, and almost raped in an alley, and then she was saved by the Hound, of course, and then she has to go from Joffrey to being married to Tyrion. He was kind to her, but still, she had to marry a Lannister, and then she's used by Littlefinger, shipped up north, dropped off with Ramsay Bolton, and we all know what happens there. And when we think about the long-suffering Sansa, we think about the long-suffering audience as well. We have been watching this show for 6 years, and this is the first time two of the Stark children have seen each other. And I was convinced last week that Jon Snow was going to walk out, and 2 minutes later Sansa was going to walk in and say, "Oh, you just missed your half-brother." But it didn't happen. And it was a little bit of a cheat to me because it's like, it shows him walking out last week, but then it begins this week and he's in his office, and he's talking to Ed, and they're still addressing him as Lord Commander. So I'm not exactly sure what his current status is, but he was still there at Castle Black, and in walks Sansa, and I got very emotional. It was a beautiful scene. The two of them, they hadn't seen each other in so long, and finally the two of them were together. And we had so many close calls. Jon almost met up with Bran at one point, as you remember. And Arya just missed Sansa when Arya arrived at the Eyrie with the Hound. I thought I would just come inside where it was a little bit less windy. So when these two characters finally get together, the emotion on their face, it was really well shot. It was well done. It was something that the audience deserved after seeing what this whole family has been through and all these characters. And it was really great to finally see two of the Starks together again. I know it's Jon Snow, but he is a Stark. He's a son of Ned Stark, and he finally gets to be with his half-sister again, somewhere that she's safe and with someone who will die protecting her. I'd be much safer traveling with Jon Snow than I would Theon, even though Theon did come around in the end. Talking about that, he comes home. He's a broken man, and he's just saying to his sister, "You should be king. Let me help you." And I think in his current state, he knows enough about the world. He's learned enough of, he's learned his lesson that he can maybe be in a position to advise her slightly. At the very least, she should allow him to just stay home, just go to his room and just heal and relax and recuperate, and just try to put what Ramsay did to him behind Theon, if that's even possible, because Ramsay really put Theon through the ringer. And I actually saw a compilation on YouTube today. It was like the making of Reek, all the Theon Ramsay scenes, and I just said to myself, if I could eliminate those from the show, if I ever go back and watch it from season 1 on, I would skip those because they were just very uncomfortable, very unpleasant. Rightfully accused of being kind of sadistic, sort of torture porn, at points. But Ramsay provoking Jon Snow the way he did with that letter, I don't understand his end game. He's already Warden of the North. He should appeal to Jon and say, "Look, we need to work together against this White Walker threat," and then maybe trick him later. But provoking him into just an all-out fight, I don't understand. I don't understand it. And we know the White Walkers are coming from north to south, so they're going to hit the wall, and they're going to hit the Night's Watch first. So I do think that they need to all obviously band together, and that's the purpose of the show. But they need to get rid of the Boltons first, or at the very least, Ramsay. And maybe Jon can undo some of the damage that Robb did. Going back thinking about seasons 2 and 3, it was really Robb making a lot of political missteps, and it cost the Starks all their bannermen. It cost the North their armies, and which is what allowed the Boltons to come to power in the first place. And I think Jon at this point is shrewd enough he won't make the same mistakes, although he's still high-minded and, almost lost his position as Lord Commander. But maybe this new Jon Snow is shrewd enough that he will lead them wisely and correctly. And maybe they'll be able to stand a chance against the oncoming threat. One of the things in this episode that I'm really trying to figure out is my boy here, Peter Baelish, Littlefinger, and what his motivations are, what game he's playing at, because now he's assembling the Knights of the Vale, and he's obviously taken full advantage of the weakness of Robb and Arryn to storm Winterfell. Now, I know his original plan was, he met with Cersei and he wants to be Warden of the North himself. So now we have, if you're Ramsay Bolton, okay, what I'm trying to figure out is he dropped Sansa off there and he said, either beat them from inside or Jon Snow will come rescue you. Either way, you're going to be fine. And in the preview for next week, she's asking him, did you know about Ramsay? Basically, did you know he was the biggest lunatic in Westeros? And I'm just having a hard time figuring out, is Littlefinger the absolute, he is the absolute mastermind, like we already know that. But is he good or evil? Like, I've heard him described as, was it lawful evil or no, neutral evil? He's neutral evil. So he has his complete own agenda. But what is it? What was the point of bringing Sansa to Winterfell? I don't understand what the point was. Why not just keep her in the Vale with Robin, where you can control her? Remember the scene where she had her hair dyed black and she was wearing like her aunt's clothes or whatever, and she was going to be the Lady of the Vale? That lasted like 2 minutes. So I just can't figure out what game he's playing at. I know that's part of the fun. That's part of the point. We're not supposed to know what game Littlefinger is playing at. Like, he's almost like unknowable. But that's something that's been bothering me a lot, and I'd love to hear a comment on what you think about it. Next week when she says, did you know about Ramsay? Of course he did. Before we get to Khaleesi, I just want to touch very briefly on Brienne of Tarth and her actually coming face-to-face with Melisandre. I didn't even think of that. I forgot about the dynamic between those two. She was sworn to protect Renly, and she knows it was Melisandre who killed Renly, and she's still holding a grudge for that. Now, she's executed Stannis in the name of Renly of the House Baratheon, but she still has a bone to pick with Melisandre, and I didn't see that angle. And it was really, the acting between them was great, and Melisandre has been broken down to the point that she's not all bluster, and in Brienne's face, she actually seems like maybe she regrets some of the things that she did for Stannis. But, okay, let's get into it. Daenerys, Ser Jorah and Daario, they were not needed. They didn't really do anything. It was cool seeing them together. They had a couple good character moments, but they weren't needed. They had no effect on the outcome of the plot. Daenerys said, you can't break me out. It's not needed. I have a plan. And unless they put some sort of an accelerant on the steps, I didn't catch that. That place seemed to go up very, very quickly, even though I know it was mostly wood. But unless they did something like that, they weren't needed. And she handled it on her own, which goes to what I said last week, is that her accomplishments are completely her own at this point. She doesn't need men coming to save her. She is the mother of dragons, the breaker of chains, and the scene at the end where she comes out after killing all the Khals. She comes out. It was the type of scene we expect from Dany, and it should make everyone in Westeros shake in their boots, because she's coming eventually. Now she has a whole Khalasar with her as well, and she's got at least 30, more Dothraki armies with her at this point. She killed all the Khals. So when she goes back to Meereen with Tyrion and Varys whispering in her ear and all that manpower behind her, she is going to be unstoppable. And if she can just get her dragons under control, she will be unstoppable. When we think about Dany's endgame too, it's been suggested that she might actually sail east and circumnavigate the globe and perhaps actually land at Casterly Rock. That is a theory that I like a lot, because we haven't seen Casterly Rock, and George R.R. Martin has said that he's saving Casterly Rock for something very special that's coming up. So if she could actually land there with Tyrion, who knows Casterly Rock very well, and he actually knows the sewer system in particular, all the tunnels, the fact that, you think about that he could actually sneak her in that way, that would be fascinating. And no one would be expecting her to come from that side. King's Landing this week, a little boring. I like the scenes with Tommen and Cersei, and Grand Maester Pycelle is just, he's just so bumbling. He's almost comic relief at this point. But Tommen is absolutely coming into his own. He's making his own decisions, and he's doing a good job resisting just having his mother rule for him. He's taking her advice, but I think he's trying to make his own decision. The scene where we see Margaery is trying to convince her brother, Sir Loras, to hang in there, to not give up, and he has given up. And she's saying, that's what they want, we have to keep fighting. It was very shrewd of Cersei to use that situation to her advantage and say to herself, we're going to bury the hatchet with Margaery, and we're going to help her. We cannot have her paraded, naked through the streets in her walk of shame. It was her grandmother who said, that cannot happen. And Cersei says, I agree. And that's a good way for her to get back into the Tyrell's good graces and maybe, have some influence on the small council again, which is clearly something she wants. So as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next week.